Today we're unpacking one of the most powerful, action-packed historical texts literally ever written, the Gospel of Mark. You know, if you're thinking ancient history is just a bunch of dusty genealogies or some slow-moving philosophy, well, you are in for a massive surprise today. Okay, let's dive right into this. We have to realize this isn't just some old, fragile manuscript. It's a rapid-fire, intense narrative that was originally written somewhere between AD 55 and 70. Now, put yourself in that time period. This was an era of intense trials and brutal persecution, specifically for Roman believers, who were quite literally fighting for their lives. Mark didn't write this to just sit on a library shelf, you know? He wrote it as a survival guide. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. We're going to break down this incredible survival guide through a three-part structural analysis. We'll look at the Roman action gospel, phase 1 of identity, the ancient prophecies, phase 2 of suffering, phase 3 of exaltation, and finally, endurance for your trials.
Let's jump straight into section 1, the Roman action gospel. This is all about tailoring the message for an absolute powerhouse of an empire.
To really grasp the sheer brilliance of this text, we have to understand the audience. Romans admired strength, right? They valued authority, courage, and relentless action. They absolutely did not have the patience for endless philosophical debates. So, notice the stark contrast here. Matthew, for instance, focuses heavily on Jewish genealogy and lengthy teachings to prove Jesus is the promised king to a Jewish audience. But Mark completely skips the ancestry and the childhood details. Why would he do that? Well, because to a Roman pragmatist, a servant is recognized by what they actually do, not where they come from. By constantly using the word immediately, Mark gives us a servant Messiah who is in constant, world-changing action.
Moving right along into Section 2, Phase 1, Identity Revealed. This covers the incredibly fast-paced Galilean ministry from Mark chapters 1 through 8.
Mark kicks off Act 1 with this incredibly high energy, basically forcing his Roman audience to ask one core question. Who exactly is Jesus? And he answers it by just piling on the miracles, one after another, to show Christ's undeniable, absolute authority over literally every facet of creation. I mean, think about it. Unclean spirits obey him. He heals the leper and the woman with an issue of blood. He calms a raging storm, he walks on water, he raises Jairus' daughter from the dead, and he even forgives the paralytic's sins. It's showing us God incarnate, constantly in motion.
Now for Section 3, Ancient Prophecies, Present Reality. How exactly do we prove the Messiah's identity?
Here's the thing. This staggering display of authority wasn't just a random assortment of magic tricks. No, it was the calculated, exact fulfillment of ancient promises. Mark brilliantly, seamlessly connects all these breathless events of the ministry right back to key Old Testament prophetic fulfillments. For example, Isaiah 40 promises a messenger to prepare the way. Well, Mark introduces John the Baptist. Isaiah 35 prophesies a healing ministry. Mark delivers exactly that with numerous accounts. Isaiah 53 says he'll be silent before his accusers. Mark shows Jesus doing exactly that in chapter 15. It's like a giant puzzle coming together, and Mark is showing how every single piece fits perfectly to validate Jesus' identity.
But right here in Mark chapter 8, the entire narrative suddenly hits the brakes. The rapid-fire pacing we've been talking about, it just slows way down. Jesus looks at his disciples and asks them who they think he is. And Peter makes this central, absolute game-changing confession. Thou art the Christ. Everything, literally everything in those first 8 chapters was building up to this exact realization.
But the second Peter says this, we pivot the narrative completely. The focus transitions sharply. See, before Mark 8, the driving question of the explainer was, who is Jesus? But now, the question becomes, what kind of Messiah is he? You have to remember, the Jewish expectation at the time was a conquering king who would violently overthrow Rome. So Mark has to completely reframe this entire concept for his readers.
Which brings us to Section 4, Phase 2, The Servant Suffers. Here we see power being redefined through suffering in chapters 8 through 10.
We really have to grapple with a massive paradox here, a king with ultimate, divine authority who actually came to serve and to suffer. Mark uses a very specific title to explain this, the Son of Man. Now, this isn't merely a title, it is the ultimate embodiment of the suffering servant. Mark 10:45 acts as kind of the thesis statement for this whole idea. He came to give his life a ransom for many. The theological significance here completely flips the script, brilliantly framing his suffering not as some tragic defeat, but as a deeply purposeful, redemptive act.
Let's trace this timeline. Mark really emphasizes 3 distinct predictions that Jesus makes about his own death. The first one hits in chapter 8, the second in chapter 9, and the third in chapter 10. What Mark is doing here is showing his persecuted Roman audience that the cross was never, ever an accident. It wasn't a failure of the movement. No way. It was a deliberate, highly structured mission. Before you get the crown, there must be the cross.
And that leads us to Section 5, Phase 3, Sacrificial Exaltation. This is the ultimate climax at Calvary in chapters 11 through 16.
In the final act of Mark's narrative, the greatest display of power isn't actually a spectacular miracle, but rather the agonizing, brutal reality of Calvary. Jesus becomes the substitute, the sacrifice, the sin-bearer that was foretold way back in Isaiah 53. Darkness covers the land, and at the exact moment of his death, the temple veil is violently torn right down the middle, completely removing the barrier between humanity and God. It's the ultimate redemptive purpose of the cross realized. And the structure here reveals Mark's absolute genius. Watch how the testimonies of his identity steadily escalate throughout the entire text. God the Father declares it in chapter 1. The demons scream it out in chapter 3. Peter confesses it in chapter 8. But at the foot of the cross, watching Jesus actually die, who is the one who finally gets it? A Roman centurion. He looks up and says, "Truly this man was the Son of God." I mean, wow. Mark perfectly culminates his gospel by having a Roman soldier, a guy who deeply understands power, authority, and execution, witnessing ultimate strength in ultimate sacrifice.
Finally, Section 6, Endurance for Your Trials. We're looking at the empty tomb and what this means as our modern survival guide. So, Mark obviously doesn't end at the cross. He concludes with the resurrection, proving that death itself is actually conquered, and the kingdom has truly begun. And honestly, this is exactly why this text matters so much to us right now. If you are facing an uphill battle today, this ancient Roman message offers a direct, practical blueprint for your own life. Christ's example takes suffering from being just a sign of meaningless defeat and completely transforms it into an intentional, purposeful path toward victory. True strength, as we see here, is sometimes just about enduring incredibly hard circumstances with purpose.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a thought to really chew on. If the servant king conquered the grave through suffering, how might your current trials be the necessary prelude to your own ultimate victory? It's a real paradigm shift, right? I'll let you reflect on that powerful thought as you navigate your own journey this week. Thanks so much for joining me.